Muy bien. Entonces, cuando me invitaron a hacer esta ponencia, recordé de un chiste de un embajador que estaba contratando un motorista que necesitaba que hablase lenguas, francés, inglés. Aparece un tío que dice, bueno, ¿usted habla inglés? No. Y francés tampoco. Y conducir, no tengo licencia. Entonces, ¿qué están haciendo aquí? Bueno, solamente venía a avisar para no contar conmigo. Bueno, some clarification up front. I'm an economist by training. Although I've been spending several years in this sector, now I'm an honorary engineer by virtue of contact and osmosis with excellent and well-qualified water sector engineering experts. Therefore, I am familiar somewhat with the language of technology, but no true knowledge of it. Moreover, in the case of Portugal, the degree of implementation of wastewater reuse solutions is truly incipient and residual. The latest published statistics by the environmental regulator was 1.34% of wastewater urban effluent in 2013 was reused, of which most of it internally in industrial installations. Therefore, only 0.1% of flows were actually supplied to third parties. Of course, I'm ruling out industrial reuse where that is fairly common, and actually last year one of the facilities of the Heineken Group in Portugal just won one of those industrial projects awards and all those things. But when it comes to reusing urban wastewater effluent, it is really an incipient experience. Therefore, I'm going to bring you a different perspective on the topic. First, from the experience, not from a technology standpoint, but from a regulatory standpoint, of which I also spent several years sitting on the board of the Portuguese water service regulator, and I can share you some of that experience. And then I bring you the perspectives of a panel of 100 Portuguese experts, where in the context of a project thinking about the next 30 years, this is one of the topics that we asked their opinion, and I'm here to share it with you today. Now, from a regulatory standpoint, one of the things that we're concerned is, okay, let's make sure first that we don't have barriers to the uptake of this technology. And the first barrier that we found was pretty much a pricing barrier, i.e., if we're thinking about creating good conditions for reuse to have an uptake, and then I have a situation where, say, you have non-domestic users who pay a tariff, a variable tariff of €1.50, then typically municipalities as users traditionally have had lower tariffs on their water users. I mean, for irrigation, for parks, and so forth. So that already creates a €1 gap versus your non-domestic standard price. So one of the first recommendations that was made, which was quite controversial, not yet fully implemented, was to say, okay, for urban uses like irrigation, washing the streets, or doing whatever, the tariff that municipalities must pay operators, or i.e. sometimes pay themselves, must be equal to the same tariff that a laundry, a factory, or whatever pays, or an office building pays for their water. Concern number one. Second was to say, whenever we had wastewater treatment operators with the ability to produce treated wastewater, was to say, it's okay for you to make a business out of it, i.e., it will not violate monopoly rights if in your territory of influence you have a different operator who is supplying the water service, because it's a different product, so there's no monopoly infringement right. So it's okay for you to do that. And they also said, you can do that yourself. You can make a deal with a third party to, basically franchise that business. So that was principle number 2. Principle number 3 was you should, the cost of your new product will start at zero, i.e. the tariff of wastewater treatment should cover all the costs in order to have the water safe to be discharged in the environment. So that reused water tariff should only cover the incremental cost of, say, tertiary treatment, and particularly its distribution to end users. Now, even against that background, the data is what it is. It's still an incipient update of this technology. I'm going to skip some of this, ready to a joke. Okay, so another thing that we did was we actually promoted an Oxford debate. I don't know if you're familiar with the methodology. We did this in the big conference that we had last year with a big panel. And basically, I'm going to provide the English translation of the motion that was on the table. So pretty much, it was moderated by our president, who's a former minister of Environment in Portugal, and we had two leading experts on the let's go for it side and two experts on the against side. And the motion on the table, and this we should read really carefully, it said, in Portugal, very important, projects for the reuse of treated urban wastewater, when not financially self-sustainable, should be the object of public subsidization. So the way the motion is crafted is basically asking, is there a value, a euro value to some of those externalities that our colleague from Suez was commenting before, i.e., because if the project is financially self-sustainable, then public authorities don't have to get into it because the market will provide for them to emerge. So the notion here, is there a deficit that should merit the allocation of public subsidies? And I must share with you that at the end of the day, the balance was still tending towards a no answer to that. In the case of Portugal, is fairly affluent when it comes to water resources, fortunately, but with some local exceptions. So the area which would have similar characteristics to where we are here in Malaga and the south of Spain would be the Algarve region, which is well known to you all. Again, huge seasonality because of tourist flows in summer. It basically also doubles its population. So we have there on the right-hand side, on those curves, basically the availability and the need for water resources, i.e. rainfall and available pollutant, and then we actually see this mismatch. So this area has been on the pipeline for some reuse initiatives for many years, but the uptake has been dismally poor up until now. And I'll comment some of the barriers of that. Well, actually, examples such as this one, this is a professor of agronomy at the University of Algarve, and here's one of the rare cases where he's actually doing it, using wastewater to having actually a fairly large size property of alfarrobas. I don't know how to say it in English. But these instances are still quite rare. Now, in the context of that project that I mentioned to you before, we asked a panel of 100 Portuguese water experts a bunch of questions. We asked them for what is their forecast, what they think will happen, and what they think should happen for their opinion. This was basically a panel comprised of former members of government, members of academia, people from companies working in the industry, engineering companies, technology companies, a lot of them also water service operators, predominantly engineers, some economists like myself, and also some legal experts. And we basically asked them, well, why don't you think about the next 30 years? And when it comes to the future importance of the reuse of treated urban wastewater, and in terms of its cost recovery model, we gave them three options. Okay? Option one was, starting at the top, bearing in mind its environmental relevance, the significant growth in treated wastewater reuse will lead this activity to be fully integrated in the cost structure of water utilities without an autonomous costing and tariff setting. I.e., in this scenario, you would have cross-subsidization like we currently have between domestic and non-domestic ratepayers, and it would be kind of almost like a standard activity within the concept of urban water services. A minority of Portuguese experts thinking that will be the case in Portugal. Again, I stress that, but actually quite interesting. A bigger proportion, thinking that the future should go that way. On the other hand, when people are asked in terms of what they think they're going to happen, on the other extreme, the perspective was still that the reuse of treated wastewater will remain an exception confined to small localized solutions for irrigation in dry areas and without economic relevance to urban water service operators. Almost the majority of people thinking this will be the future, but actually a small minority thinking this should be the future. So, in conclusion, some of the comments and the verbatim that I would sum up for you coming from these three angles of analysis is one, to be somewhat aware of environmental fundamentalism, okay? But also that environmental regulation can be in itself a major barrier. I remember hearing several complaints of promoters who couldn't find a civil servant who would sign a declaration telling them basically it would be okay to reuse water in a given specific circumstance, because they're still missing, guidelines, and there's risk aversion on that front, and that is sad when that is happening. So saying it's okay to reuse under specific circumstances. It has to do with asymmetric risk aversion, and I think it's relevant that the European Union is leading an effort to try and have clearer guidelines for it to be okay to use water if there are interested parties in doing that. Also, in these things, some skepticism about the adoption of certain technologies, i.e. beware Greeks bearing gifts or whatever, Northern European technology lobbying promoting some of these technologies. Also, I did find, particularly in the case of Algarve, sometimes some excessive water utility risk aversion as a promoter. What I mean by this, as sitting on the regulator side, I would see projects, particularly to promote users to golf courses, where the utility pretty much was unwilling to accept any percentage of risk in the project, and therefore it was unbalanced. So in that case, it was also a barrier to uptake. So some degree of assumption of cost must exist on all parties. And again, but I think inevitably technology progress will be likely to make the economics of substitution more appealing in the future. I think in the case of Portugal, with the exception of the Algarve, I think it would be interesting to see further reuse, particularly in urban purposes like irrigation, washing the streets, all those things, because I think technology will drive us there ultimately. Okay, thank you very much.